Hi, welcome back. It's the Heretic Chick. And so today I want to update you on a situation. I'm in a class, which is a great class. I'm not here to like knock it or make fun of it. There's some really wonderful people in the class, and it's not like I can never learn anything in the class. I have learned things in the class. But the main reason I go is just because I like the people. I like to get to chat with people, get to know people. And I think it's really important to be able to do that, even if you don't agree, you know? And so, but in this class, we've been going through Matthew. And well, someone said, why are you going to this class? It'd be so frustrating for me. And yeah, it is. Sometimes it's frustrating. You know, when we did Matthew chapter 16 and nobody even discusses, like, why did Jesus say some of those people weren't going to taste death before the kingdom came? He said he was about to come with his angels to repay each man according to what they had done. Some of you standing here will not taste death before you see this happen. Nobody mentions that. I don't know. But, so yes, that was a little bit frustrating. But one of the reasons I'm staying, besides the fact that the people can be nice, is I really want to hear what they say when we get to Matthew 24:34. You know, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. I'm dying to hear what they say. And so anyway, here I am. And last time we talked about how in this class they went over the parable of the tenants. Remember that parable? There was a master of a house. He plants a vineyard, puts a fence, digs a wine press, and he leased it out to these tenants. You know, and these tenants are obviously, everyone agrees, the Pharisees, the Jews, you know. And he leases it, and then he sends his servants to collect the fruit, and they beat the servants, they stone the servants, they kill the servants. And then finally he says, oh, I'll send my son. They'll respect the son. And when they saw the son, they said, whoa, hey, this is the heir, we'll kill him, and then it'll all be ours. And so they did. And of course, we know that the son was Christ. They killed the son. And then Jesus says to the Pharisees, like, well, what's the master going to do? And they said, oh, he's going to put those wretches to a miserable death. And then Jesus says, the stone who the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, talking about himself. And then they realized, oh, shoot, this whole time this parable was about us. They realized, he said, I'm taking the kingdom from you. You're the tenants who killed the servants, and you're going to kill the son, which is me. And then, you know, you said it, you pronounced it yourself. I'm going to put you to a miserable death. Well, I was pointing out in the last video that, you know, nobody even brought up 70 AD when the Jews were put to a miserable death. The wretches were put to a miserable death in 70 AD. And he took the kingdom from them, the Jews, the unbelieving Jews, and he handed it to the Christians. Nobody even mentioned it. Some people have said to me, well, you know, why didn't you say anything? You should have spoken up. I mean, it's not that I've never spoken up, but you have to know your audience a little, and sometimes there's no point, or you have to pick your battles. And I'm kind of saving it up. You know, I don't want to get kicked out of the class before we get to Matthew 24. So anyway, so last week we did the parable of the wedding feast. This comes right after the parable of the tenants. Okay, parable of the tenants. Next week, let's do the parable of the wedding feast. And I'm going to read it to you briefly. This is one of the parables that just made so much more sense when I understood that it had been fulfilled. Again, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son and sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. Okay, so there were people who were invited to the wedding feast. This is the Jews. You know, they were invited. He sends the servants to call, you know, prophets, apostles, Again, he sends other servants saying, tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen, my fat calves have been slaughtered. Everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. But they paid no attention. This is what the Jews did. They paid no attention. They went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. This is exactly what they did to Jesus and to the apostles. The king, God, was angry, and he sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Okay. Can anyone, how do you not see 70 AD in this? He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. I mean, this is exactly what happened to Jerusalem 40 years after this parable was told. Rome came, surrounded Jerusalem, and their city was burned to the ground and utterly destroyed. And then he goes out to the main roads and invites as many as you can find. They gathered all whom they found, both bad and good, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. So I was waiting to see if anyone would bring up 70 AD here, because it's just so obvious. He burned their city, and he's just, in the parable before, said, I'm going to take the kingdom from you and I'm going to give it to those bearing fruit. Then they know he's talking about them. Then we come to the next parable. It's very, very similar. And at the end, he burns their city. This is what happened to them. And so there was a leader, and he didn't mention it, but we're at different tables. And at our table, one guy who we've actually shared what we believe with him, and he doesn't agree with everything, but he does have, he's a partial fulfilled person. So he sees some of it, and he has heard of 70 AD before. So he brought up, I think that this might be at least partially referring to what happened in 70 AD and the destruction of Jerusalem. And this other couple that was at the table, I mean, I don't want to try to be a mind reader, but it seemed like she was like, oh, and then she started writing in her Bible like she's never heard of this before. So I thought that was really interesting that someone at our table brought it up, not to the whole class, but to our table. I was really happy about that. And obviously some other people at our table had never heard of this event before, the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. So yeah, very interesting. And I'm glad at least someone mentioned it, and it didn't have to be me, because, I'm the crazy one. But we'll see what happens, because we're coming up on Matthew chapter 23. So in Matthew chapter 23, remember, Jesus pronounces the 7 woes on the scribes, the Pharisees, the religious leaders. And at the end, he says, all the blood of the righteous, from Abel to Zechariah, is going to come on you. All the martyrs that have been martyred from the beginning until now are going to come on you in this generation. This generation. And there's a lot of people, even futurists, who understand that Jesus was there talking about the destruction of Jerusalem that happened in their generation 40 years later. And the problem with that is that just one chapter later, Jesus mentions a whole bunch of other things that sound a lot like the second coming, what we've been told is, this future event to us. And he again says that all of these things will take place before this generation passes away. He says this generation will by no means pass away until all these things have taken place. And so when they get to chapter 24, suddenly this generation doesn't mean this generation anymore. I'm expecting them to say that. I'm wondering what they're going to say about this generation in chapter 23, if they're going to even bring it up as a possibility that this was talking about the destruction of Jerusalem that happened in their generation. So when they get to 24, I don't know. You can take some guesses. I'm guessing we could have the generation means race thing, which I think might be falling out of favor, hopefully. He doesn't mean this generation. He means a future far off generation. That's probably the one. And then they'll probably try to split the Olivet Discourse and maybe say some of those things have happened and some will happen in the future. And I don't know where they, like how they come up with that, because doesn't Jesus literally say all these things? Let's look. Yeah, truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away. I think it really means will by no means, definitely not going to pass away until all these things take place. The problem with that is verse 29, what is right before that? Right before Jesus says, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. He says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to another. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Wow. That's going to be a challenging one. And I feel bad for whoever has to teach class that day. But we'll see. I'll keep you updated.